The smoke had not yet cleared from the battlefield when Captain Jake Morrison made his way through the ruins. His medical kit hung heavy on his back and his boots crunched on the scorched ground of Kryn 7. All around him lay the wreckage of war. Broken machines smoldered in the red dust. The air tasted of metal and chemicals. Jake was a field medic with the Terran Medical Corps. He had seen 34 years of life, and too many of those years had been spent on battlefields like this one. His uniform was stained with blood, both human and alien. His hands shook slightly, not from fear but from exhaustion. They had been fighting the Kresh swarm for 18 hours straight. The human forces had won this engagement. The insectoid aliens had retreated, leaving their dead behind. Jake's commanding officer had already called for evacuation. The transport ships would arrive within the hour. Most soldiers were gathering their gear and tending to their wounded. Jake should have been doing the same, but something caught his attention. A clicking sound, faint and rhythmic, coming from a crater about 50 meters ahead. Jake turned toward it. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Amy Hart, noticed immediately. "Captain, we need to move to the extraction point," Amy said. She was younger than Jake, only 26, but she had good instincts. Her blonde hair was tied back in a tight bun, and her gray eyes were alert despite the long battle. "I heard something," Jake said. He started walking toward the crater. "It's probably just debris settling," Amy replied, but she followed him anyway. That was Amy. She disagreed often, but she never abandoned her team. When they reached the edge of the crater, Jake stopped so suddenly that Amy almost ran into him. At the bottom of the crater, partially buried in rubble, lay a Kreshnar warrior. It was massive, at least 12 feet tall even lying down. Its body was covered in a thick, chitinous armor that reflected the dim sunlight like black glass. Forearms ending in blade-like claws were splayed at odd angles. Its head was triangular, dominated by huge, multifaceted eyes and mandibles that could cut through steel. Green ichor pooled beneath the creature. Its armor was cracked in multiple places, and one of its limbs was bent at an impossible angle. The clicking sound came from its mandibles opening and closing slowly, mechanically. The creature was dying. "Holy hell," Amy whispered. "Captain, we need to back away, now." Jake did not move. He studied the creature, his medical training taking over. He could see the wounds clearly. Plasma burns on the torso, puncture wounds through the armor, a massive gash along its side where the armor had been torn away, revealing the soft tissue beneath. "It's been left behind," Jake said quietly. "Good," Amy replied. "Let's keep it that way. The Kresh don't take prisoners, and they don't leave wounded. If that thing is here, it's because it's too dangerous to move or it's a trap." Jake shook his head. "Look at the wounds. Some of those aren't from our weapons." Amy looked closer. She saw what Jake meant. Some of the puncture wounds had a distinct pattern, like marks from Kresh claws. The creature had been attacked by its own kind. "They left it here to die," Jake said. He started climbing down into the crater. "Captain, what are you doing?" Amy's voice rose in pitch. "That's a Kreshnar. They've killed thousands of our people. They don't show mercy and we don't owe them any." Jake reached the bottom of the crater and approached the alien carefully. The creature's eyes tracked his movement. Intelligence flickered in those alien eyes, along with something Jake recognized from 100 battlefields. Pain. Fear. The knowledge of approaching death. "I'm a medic," Jake said, more to himself than to Amy. "I took an oath." "Your oath is to humans," Amy argued. She had climbed down after him, her rifle raised and pointed at the Kreshnar. "That thing would tear you apart without a second thought." "Maybe," Jake admitted. He knelt beside the creature, close enough that it could have struck him if it had the strength. "But it's not tearing me apart now. It's dying, and something about this is wrong." The Kreshnar made a low sound almost like a groan. Its mandibles clicked rapidly. Jake opened his medical kit and pulled out a scanner. He ran it over the creature's body, getting readings that made no sense. The biology was completely alien, but the scanner could at least tell him about blood loss and vital signs. "It's in shock," Jake said. "Massive trauma. Internal bleeding. If I don't do something, it'll be dead in an hour. So let it die," Amy said. But her voice had lost some of its certainty. Jake looked up at her. "Amy, in all the battles we fought against the Kresh, have you ever seen them abandon a wounded warrior?" Amy was quiet for a moment. "No, they either take them or they kill them. They never leave them." "Exactly," Jake said. "So why is this one here? Why did they leave it alive but make sure it would die slowly?" Amy did not have an answer. Jake turned back to the Kreshnar. He made a decision that would change everything. "I'm going to stabilize it," he said. "Then we're taking it with us." "You've lost your mind," Amy said flatly. "Command will never allow it. Colonel Harris will have you court-martialed. Hell, I should arrest you right now." "You could," Jake agreed. He pulled out a surgical laser and began cutting away the damaged armor around the worst wound. The Kreshnar flinched but did not try to fight. "But you won't." Amy watched him work for a long moment. Finally, she lowered her rifle and tapped her communication device. "This is Lieutenant Hart. We need emergency medical evacuation at grid reference 773. Multiple casualties. How many wounded?" the voice on the other end asked. Amy looked at Jake, then at the alien creature he was desperately trying to save. "2 humans and 1 other. Prepare for a large transport. Define large. 12 feet long, 6 feet wide. And you're not going to like what it is." There was a long pause. "Say again, Lieutenant?" "You heard me." Hard out. Jake worked quickly. He injected the Kreshnar with broad-spectrum antibiotics that might or might not work on alien biology. He sealed the worst wounds with medical foam. He stabilized the broken limb. The creature watched him the entire time, those alien eyes never leaving his face. 20 minutes later, the transport arrived. The pilot took one look at the Kreshnar and refused to take it. Jake pulled rank. He threatened. He called in every favor he had. Finally, the pilot agreed, but only if the alien was sedated and restrained. As they loaded the massive creature onto the transport, soldiers gathered to watch. Word had spread quickly. The looks Jake received ranged from disbelief to anger. He ignored them all. Amy stood beside him as the transport lifted off. "You know this is going to end badly," she said. Jake watched the battlefield disappear beneath them. "Maybe, but I couldn't leave it there. Something made the Kresh abandon one of their own. I need to know what. And maybe, just maybe, showing mercy when no one expects it is what makes us better than them." Amy sighed. "You're either the bravest person I know or the dumbest. I haven't decided which." Jake managed a tired smile. "Can't it be both?" The transport carried them away from the battlefield, toward the human carrier that orbited Kryn 7. Below, the red dust settled over the scarred land. Above, Jake Morrison and his team flew toward an uncertain future, carrying with them the most dangerous cargo imaginable, an enemy who should have been left to die. The carrier Darwin hung in orbit like a massive steel city. Jake Morrison watched it grow larger through the transport window as they approached. His hands were still covered in green alien blood. The Kreshnar warrior lay behind him in the cargo bay, sedated and strapped down with enough restraints to hold 3 men. The radio had been busy for the entire flight. Jake could hear Colonel Ben Harris shouting even through the static. The colonel was demanding explanations. He was threatening court-martial. He was ordering the transport to dump its cargo into space. Jake had stopped responding 10 minutes ago. Amy sat across from him, her face unreadable. "You still have time to change your mind," she said quietly. "We could say it died in transport. No one would question it." Jake shook his head. "I made my choice." The transport docked with the Darwin. The airlock opened, and Jake found himself facing a wall of Marines. They stood in formation, weapons ready, as if expecting an invasion. Behind them stood Colonel Harris. Ben Harris was 52 years old and looked like he had been carved from granite. His gray hair was cut military short, and his jaw was set in a permanent scowl. He had fought in every major battle against the Kresh. He had lost his son to them 3 years ago. Jake knew all of this, which made what he had done even more difficult to explain. "Captain Morrison," Harris said, his voice dangerously calm, "step out of the transport." Jake obeyed. He stood at attention, waiting. "Is it true?" Harris asked. "Did you really bring a live Kreshnar warrior onto my ship?" "Yes, sir." "Why?" It was a simple question, but Jake struggled to find a simple answer. How could he explain the look in the creature's eyes? How could he make the colonel understand that leaving it to die felt wrong in a way that went beyond logic or military procedure? "Because it needed help, sir," Jake said finally. "And because something about the situation did not make sense. The Kresh do not abandon their wounded. This one was left to die deliberately." "So your solution was to bring an enemy combatant onto a military vessel full of sensitive equipment and exhausted soldiers?" Harris stepped closer. "Do you have any Idea how many regulations you just violated, how many lives you put at risk. Sir, if I may, a new voice interrupted. A woman stepped forward from behind the Marines. She was in her 40s, wearing a white lab coat over her uniform. Her dark eyes were bright with curiosity. I am Dr. Lisa Chen, the ship's xenobiologist. I would very much like to examine this specimen. Harris turned to her. Specimen? It's not a lab rat, Doctor. It's a warrior from a species that has been trying to exterminate us for 5 years. Exactly, Lisa said. We have studied dead Kresh before, but never a living one. The knowledge we could gain from this creature could save countless human lives. We could learn about their physiology, their weaknesses, their biology. Or it could be a biological weapon, Harris countered. It could be carrying diseases. It could have tracking devices implanted. It could wake up and kill half my crew before we take it down. All possibilities, Lisa admitted. But think of what we could learn if none of those things are true. Captain Morrison has given us an incredible opportunity. Harris looked at Jake. Is that what this was? An opportunity for science? No, sir, Jake said honestly. I did it because I could not leave a wounded being to die. But if something good can come from it, then maybe my decision was right. Harris was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he sighed. Get it to a secure medical bay. Isolated section, level 5. Full quarantine procedures. Marines on guard at all times. If that thing so much as twitches wrong, we put it down. Understood? Yes, sir, Jake said. And Morrison? You are confined to quarters when not treating the prisoner. We will discuss your future after I decide whether to court-martial you or just throw you in the brig. Jake nodded. He had expected worse. The next several hours were chaos. Moving the Kreshnar through the ship required clearing entire corridors. Soldiers lined the walls, weapons trained on the unconscious alien as medical robots guided it on an anti-gravity stretcher. Some soldiers cursed, others just stared. One young private started crying, and Jake learned later that the boy had lost his entire family to a Kresh attack. The secure medical bay was normally used for patients with contagious diseases. It had reinforced walls, independent life support, and could be sealed off from the rest of the ship in seconds. They set up the alien on a specially reinforced surgical table. Lisa brought in scanners and monitors, creating a web of equipment around the creature. Jake worked through the night. The Kreshnar's biology was like nothing he had encountered. It had 6 hearts, 3 circulatory systems, and organs he could not identify. Its blood was copper-based, which was why it looked green. Its nervous system was distributed throughout its body rather than centralized in a brain. But despite all the differences, Jake found that treating it was not so different from treating a human. Stop the bleeding, repair the damage, keep the patient stable. The fundamentals were the same. Lisa worked beside him, making notes and taking samples. This is incredible, she kept saying. Do you see this cell structure? It is completely unique. Around midnight, the Kreshnar started to wake up. Jake saw its eyes open slowly, the multifaceted surfaces catching the light. The creature's mandibles began clicking rapidly. Its body tensed against the restraints. The Marines outside raised their weapons. Jake could hear them shouting into their radios. But the alien did not try to break free. It just looked at Jake, those alien eyes focusing on his face. Jake stepped closer, ignoring Amy's warning. He spoke softly, not expecting the creature to understand, but hoping his tone would convey calm. You are safe. I am trying to help you. The Kreshnar made a sound, a series of clicks and subsonic vibrations that Jake felt in his chest more than heard. Then slowly, the creature stopped struggling. It continued to watch Jake, but the panic seemed to leave its body. It recognizes you, Lisa said with wonder. It remembers that you helped it. Over the next few days, Jake spent every waking hour in the medical bay. He changed bandages. He monitored vital signs. He adjusted medications. The Kreshnar improved slowly but steadily. Against all odds, it was going to survive. Jake started calling it Echo because of the clicking sounds it made. The name seemed to fit. Lisa tried to communicate with it using various methods, but nothing worked. The creature's language was too alien, too dependent on pheromones and sounds humans could not produce. On the 5th day, Jake noticed something that made him stop in his tracks. He was examining the wounds again, taking images for Lisa's research, when he saw the pattern clearly. The wounds from Kresh weapons were not from combat. They were too precise, too deliberate. They were punishment. Jake called Lisa over. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a series of cuts across the creature's back. "These were not made in battle. Someone did this carefully, making sure not to hit any vital areas. They wanted it to hurt, but not die quickly." Lisa studied the wounds through her scanner. "You are right. These are torture marks. This creature was tortured by its own kind before being abandoned." The implications were staggering. The Kresh were supposed to be a unified hive mind, all working toward the same goal. Individual cruelty, personal punishment, these things should not exist in a hive society, unless this particular Kreshnar was different somehow, unless it had done something to deserve being cast out. Jake looked at Echo, at the intelligent eyes that watched him work. "What did you do?" he asked softly. "What made them hurt you like this?" Echo clicked. A long, complicated pattern that might have been an answer, or might have been nothing. Jake did not know, but he was determined to find out. Colonel Harris visited on the 6th day. He looked at Echo at the charts showing its recovery at Jake's careful notes. "It is healing," he said, not quite a question. "Yes, sir," Jake replied. "Another week and it should be stable enough for questioning." Harris nodded slowly. "I have been reading the reports. About the wounds, about the patterns that suggest deliberate torture. What is your theory, Captain?" Jake chose his words carefully. "I think this creature is not like the others, sir. I think it did something that made the swarm want it dead, and I think if we can figure out what that something was, we might learn how to win this war." Harris stared at him for a long moment. "You saved its life. That makes you responsible for it. If it turns out to be a threat, that is on you." "I understand, sir." Harris turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Morrison, what you did was reckless and violated about a dozen protocols, but it might also have been the smartest thing anyone has done in this war. Do not make me regret not throwing you in the brig." After Harris left, Jake sat down in a chair near Echo's bed. The Kreshnar was awake, watching him with those unreadable eyes. Jake wondered what the creature was thinking. Did it understand that Jake had saved its life? Did it care? Or was Jake projecting human emotions onto something utterly alien? As if in answer, Echo slowly moved one of its clawed hands. The movement was weak, restrained by the bonds but deliberate. The hand reached toward Jake, stopping just short of touching him. The claws that could tear through armor folded back carefully. Then the hand simply rested there, palm up, in what could only be described as a gesture of peace. Jake stared at the offered hand. Then slowly he reached out and placed. 3 weeks had passed since Jake Morrison brought Echo aboard the Darwin. The Kreshnar warrior was recovering well, though it still wore restraints and remained under constant guard. The medical bay had become Jake's second home. He spent 12 hours a day there, monitoring Echo's progress and trying to understand the alien creature that should have been his enemy. Lieutenant Commander Paul Grant arrived on a Tuesday morning. He was a thin man with sharp features and calculating eyes. Intelligence officers always made Jake nervous. They looked at everything as if it might be a trick or a trap. Paul introduced himself efficiently and got straight to business. "I am here to attempt communication with the prisoner," Paul said, setting up a portable computer station near Echo's bed. "We have developed translation software based on recordings of Kresh communications. It is not perfect, but it might work." Echo watched the preparations with obvious interest. The creature had been docile since waking up, almost cooperative. It allowed medical procedures without resistance and had not tried to escape even when Jake loosened some of the restraints. But whether this was gratitude, cunning, or something else entirely remained a mystery. Dr. Lisa Chen joined them, bringing new scanning equipment. "I have been studying Echo's neural patterns," she explained. "The distribution of nerve clusters is different from other Kresh we have examined. This one has more neural density in the brain region, which suggests higher cognitive function. So it is smarter than the average Kreshnar," Paul said. That could make it more dangerous. Or more capable of meaningful communication, Lisa countered. Captain Nina Ross, the ship's security chief, stood by the door with her arms crossed. She was a solid woman in her 30s, built like a fighter and twice as tough. She had made her opinion of Echo very clear from the start. We should have spaced it the moment it came aboard, she said, for what must have been the 100th time. Every minute it stays here is a risk we are prepared to manage, Paul replied. He activated the translation device, which began projecting a soft blue light. Let us see if this works. Paul began with simple concepts. He showed Echo pictures of objects and spoke their names. The translation device analyzed Echo's clicking responses and attempted to find patterns. For the first hour, nothing seemed to work. Echo clicked and gestured, but the computer could make no sense of it. Then Lisa had an idea. The creche use pheromones as part of their communication, she said. Maybe the device needs to analyze chemical signals too. She modified the equipment to include pheromone sensors. The next time Echo responded to a question, the computer lit up with data. Slowly, painfully slowly, a basic vocabulary began to form. It took 3 days of constant work before they could exchange simple ideas. Echo could understand basic questions and provide simple answers. The breakthrough came when Paul asked about Echo's designation. Echo responded with a long series of clicks. The computer translated, Designation Echo 7, 3rd Genetic Line. Shock Troop Division. Echo 7, Jake repeated. That's who you are. The alien made a sound that the computer interpreted as affirmation. Then it added something that made everyone in the room freeze. Designation obsolete. Identity rejected. Echo is thinker. Thinkers are errors. What does that mean? Nina asked, her hand moving to her weapon. What is a thinker? Over the next week, the truth emerged piece by piece. The story Echo told was disturbing and completely unexpected. The creche swarm operated on a hive mind controlled by queens. Individual creche were supposed to be extensions of that hive mind, with no independent thought or free will. They existed to serve the swarm and nothing else, but occasionally genetic anomalies occurred. Some creche were born with the capacity for individual thought, for questioning, for doubts. These were called thinkers, and they were considered dangerous aberrations. When discovered, thinkers were punished and eliminated. Echo had been a thinker from birth, but had hidden it successfully for years. It followed orders. It fought battles. It pretended to be just another mindless warrior. But inside, it questioned everything. Why were they fighting? What was the purpose of endless war? Why did victory always require such brutal methods? During a recent battle, Echo had hesitated when ordered to kill human prisoners. That hesitation had been noticed. Echo's handlers realized what it was and immediately moved to eliminate it. The torture and abandonment on the battlefield was meant to serve as an example to other potential thinkers. Individual thought was not tolerated in the swarm. So you are a defector, Paul said, making rapid notes on his computer. An enemy soldier who turned against their own kind. Not turned, Echo clicked back. The translation was getting smoother now. Always different. Always alone. Hive mind loud and head. Painful. Constant noise. Thinkers feel but cannot show. Must pretend. Always pretend. Jake felt something twist in his chest. He had spent the war thinking of the creche as monsters, as mindless killing machines. But Echo was describing a life of constant fear and isolation, of being trapped in a body that belonged to someone else's will. It was a kind of slavery Jake had never imagined. How many thinkers are there? Lisa asked. Echo's response was uncertain. Unknown. Thinkers hide. Recognize each other by small signs, small resistances. Maybe hundreds, maybe thousands. All hiding, all afraid. Nina was not convinced. This could all be lies. A story designed to make us sympathetic. We have no way to verify any of this. We could test it, Paul suggested. Echo claims to have information about swarm tactics and weaknesses. If that information proves accurate, it would support the story. Over the next 2 weeks, Echo provided intelligence that proved devastatingly accurate. It described swarm communication protocols, attack patterns, and weak points in their battle formations. Human forces used this information in 3 separate engagements and won each one with minimal casualties. Echo's knowledge saved hundreds of lives, but trust remained fragile. Many crew members had lost friends and family to the creche. They could not accept working with one, no matter the justification. Twice attempts were made on Echo's life. The first was a sabotaged food delivery that would have poisoned the creature. The second was more direct. A sergeant named Dan Murphy entered the medical bay one night when only Jake was present. Dan was 40 years old and had cold eyes. He carried a plasma rifle and looked ready to use it. Jake recognized him. Dan had lost his daughter to a crash attack 6 months ago. "Step aside, Captain," Dan said quietly. "That thing killed my little girl. It does not deserve to live." Echo was not there, Jake said, moving between the sergeant and the alien. "You know that." "Does not matter. It is one of them. They are all guilty." Dan raised his rifle. Jake did not move. Behind him, Echo made a sound. Jake glanced back and saw something unexpected. Echo was not trying to break free of its restraints. It was not preparing to fight. Instead, the alien had lowered its head, mandibles closed in what could only be interpreted as submission. Echo understood what was happening. It understood Dan's pain, and it was accepting the consequences. "It is not fighting back," Jake said softly. "Look at it, Dan. It knows why you are here, and it is not fighting." Dan's hands shook. Tears ran down his weathered face. "My daughter was 7 years old. She was scared of the dark and loved strawberry ice cream. They killed her like she was nothing." "I know," Jake said, "and I am sorry. But Echo is not the one who killed her. Echo is a prisoner of the same system that took your daughter. Killing it will not bring her back." The standoff lasted for what felt like an hour but was probably only minutes. Finally, Dan lowered his weapon. He looked at Echo with eyes full of pain and confusion. "I do not understand this. Any of this? Neither do I," Jake admitted. "But I think that is the point. We do not have to understand it. We just have to choose mercy over revenge." Dan left without another word. Jake sat down heavily, his legs suddenly weak. Echo made a quiet clicking sound that the translation device interpreted as gratitude. The incident changed something aboard the Darwin. Word spread about how Echo had refused to defend itself, how it had accepted its potential execution without resistance. Some crew members remained hostile, but others began to see the alien differently. It was hard to hate something that showed such understanding of their pain. Colonel Harris called a meeting with all senior staff to discuss what to do with Echo. Admiral Kevin Blake joined via video link from the fleet flagship. Admiral Blake was 60 years old with white hair and a reputation for making hard decisions. "This situation is unprecedented," the Admiral said. "We have an enemy combatant who claims to be part of a resistance movement within the swarm. The intelligence it has provided has been valuable. But we need to decide what our next move is." Ambassador Claire Santos spoke up. She was the Terran Diplomatic Corps representative, a woman who thought about politics and long-term consequences. "If what Echo says is true, we could be looking at a major shift in the war. A resistance movement within the Kresh could be cultivated as an ally. But it is also a risk. We could be creating a third faction with its own agenda." "Echo has proposed a plan," Paul said. "It believes there is a way to contact other thinkers, possibly even to disrupt the hive mind's control temporarily. The translation technology we developed could be modified." The communication array modification took 2 weeks of constant work. Jake Morrison watched as engineers transformed the Darwin's primary broadcast system into something that could transmit the complex signal Echo had described. The signal was a carefully designed pattern of sounds, electromagnetic pulses, and chemical markers that would theoretically resonate with the neural patterns of thinkers throughout the swarm. Echo worked alongside the human engineers, its forearms moving with surprising delicacy as it adjusted frequencies and calibrated equipment. The creature had proven to have an intuitive understanding of technology that impressed even the most skeptical crew members, but trust remained fragile. Marines watched Echo constantly, weapons ready in case the alien showed any sign of betrayal. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Echo had been clicking and gesturing at a particular frequency setting for hours, trying to explain something that the translation device could not quite capture. Finally, Dr. Lisa Chen brought in a new piece of equipment she had been developing in secret. "I have been working on a neural interface," Lisa explained, holding up a device that looked like a metal headband covered in sensors. "It should allow direct thought transmission between species. The technology is experimental, but if it works, we could communicate with Echo more clearly." Jake looked at the device doubtfully. "You want to connect a human brain to a Kresh brain? That sounds incredibly dangerous." "It is," Lisa admitted. but we need better communication. Echo is trying to tell us something important about the signal and we are missing it. Colonel Ben Harris, who had been observing the work, stepped forward. Absolutely not. We are not plugging untested alien technology into anyone's brain. End of discussion. But Echo had understood enough of the conversation to react. The creature clicked urgently and pointed at the neural interface, then at itself, then at Jake. The translation device struggled with the rapid input but managed. Trust. Need trust. Show human. Important. Time running short. What do you mean time is running short? Jake asked. Echo struggled to explain. Through the limited translation, they learned that Echo had been sending subtle signals to other thinkers using the ship's standard communications. These signals were hidden within normal radio traffic, invisible to human monitoring but detectable to those who knew how to look. Echo had made contact with another thinker, one designated Whisper 3. Whisper 3 was embedded deep within a swarm battle group currently moving toward human territory. According to Echo, Whisper 3 had critical information about an upcoming major offensive. Thousands of human lives were at stake. But the information was too complex to transmit through the basic translation device. They needed the neural interface to communicate properly. Jake made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. I will do it. Connect me to Echo. Captain, that is not wise, Lieutenant Amy Hart said immediately. We have no idea what that device will do to your brain. It could kill you. It could let Echo control you. This is too risky. Everything we have done since I found Echo on that battlefield has been risky, Jake replied. But it has worked. Echo has given us good intelligence. It has been cooperative. It accepted death rather than harm one of our crew. At some point, we have to take the leap of faith. Lisa looked at Colonel Harris. Sir, I believe the device is safe. I have tested it extensively on animals, but I cannot guarantee zero risk. Harris was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he sighed. If this goes wrong, Morrison, I am going to be very angry at you. Proceed. Lisa attached the neural interface to Jake's head first, making careful adjustments. The sensation was strange, like having someone else's thoughts brushing against his own. Then she attached a matching device to Echo's triangular skull. The alien held perfectly still, trusting the human doctor completely. Activating the link in 3, 2, 1, Lisa said. The world exploded into sensation. Jake gasped as his mind suddenly expanded to encompass something vast and alien. He could feel Echo's thoughts, not as words, but as concepts and emotions. The Kresh did not think in language the way humans did. They thought in patterns, in shared experiences, in collective memory. But Echo was different. Where the hive mind should have been a constant roar of shared consciousness, there was instead a careful wall. Echo had learned to build barriers in its own mind, creating a space where individual thought could exist. It was like standing in a quiet room while an ocean raged outside the walls. Jake understood immediately why thinkers were considered aberrations. They were islands of silence in a sea of noise. They were individuals in a place where individuality was not supposed to exist. And the effort required to maintain those barriers, to pretend to be part of the hive while remaining separate, was exhausting. Through the neural link, Echo showed Jake what Whisper 3 had communicated. The swarm was gathering for a massive assault on the human colony of New Terra. 3 queens and 10,000 warriors were moving into position. The attack would come in 6 days. New Terra had a population of 200,000 civilians with minimal defenses. It would be a slaughter, but Whisper 3 had also revealed something else. There were at least 50 thinkers embedded within that battle group. They had been sabotaging equipment, delaying preparations, causing confusion. But they could not stop the attack alone. They needed help. They needed the signal that Echo and the humans were preparing. If the signal was broadcast during the battle, those 50 thinkers could be awakened fully. They could potentially convince or force some of the regular Kresh warriors to break from the hive mind's control. The attack could be stopped from within, saving countless lives on both sides. Jake also felt something else through the connection. He felt Echo's pain, the constant struggle of hiding what it truly was. He felt its fear of being discovered and destroyed. And he felt its hope, fragile but real, that maybe things could change, that maybe thinkers did not have to hide anymore. When Lisa disconnected the neural interface, Jake stumbled and had to grab a table for support. His head pounded with the after effects of the connection. But he had the information they needed. New Terra, he said, his voice hoarse. They are going to attack New Terra in 6 days. We need to move now. Admiral Kevin Blake was informed immediately. An emergency meeting was called via secure channel with all fleet commanders. Jake explained what he had learned, leaving out the more personal aspects of the neural connection. The admirals listened with expressions ranging from skeptical to alarmed. How reliable is this intelligence? One admiral asked. We are talking about redirecting a significant portion of our fleet based on information from a Kresh prisoner. Echo's previous intelligence has been completely accurate, Jake argued. And this comes from another thinker inside the swarm. They are risking everything to give us this warning. Or it is a trap, another admiral countered. We move our fleet to New Terra, and the real attack comes somewhere else. Admiral Blake held up his hand for silence. Whether it is a trap or not, we cannot ignore a potential threat to New Terra. We will send reinforcements, but we will also maintain defensive positions elsewhere. Captain Morrison, you and your team will accompany the fleet. If this signal of yours can really disrupt the swarm from within, we need to be ready to deploy it. The Darwin joined a battle group of 12 ships and began the 3-day journey to New Terra. During the flight, Jake spent hours with Echo refining the signal and preparing for what was coming. They used the neural interface several more times, and each connection made Jake understand the alien better. He learned that Echo had a sibling among the thinkers, one who had been discovered and killed 2 years earlier. He learned that Echo dreamed, something that regular Kresh did not do, and that those dreams were filled with images of freedom and silence. He learned that Echo had chosen its own name after Jake started using it, embracing the human concept of individual identity. Not everyone aboard the Darwin was comfortable with how close Jake and Echo had become. Nina Ross confronted Jake in the hallway one evening. You are getting too attached to that creature, she said bluntly. You are starting to think of it as a friend. That is dangerous. Maybe, Jake admitted, but Echo is not just a tool or a weapon. It is a living being with thoughts and feelings. If we treat our allies like objects, what does that make us? Practical, Nina replied. Look, I respect what you did. You saved that thing's life and it turned out to be useful. But do not forget what it is. When this is over, when we do not need it anymore, decisions will have to be made. What kind of decisions? Nina met his eyes steadily. The kind that keep our people safe. Echo knows too much about our systems, our tactics, our weaknesses. We cannot just let it go, Jake felt cold. So after everything, after Echo has helped us and saved lives, you want to kill it? I want to protect humanity, Nina said. Sometimes that requires hard choices. She walked away, leaving Jake standing alone in the corridor. He realized then that even if they won the coming battle, even if the signal worked perfectly, Echo's future was uncertain. The alien had nowhere to go. It could never return to the swarm, and many humans would never accept it as an ally. Jake found Echo in the medical bay, reviewing tactical displays of the new Terra system. The alien looked up as Jake entered. The space around New Terra glittered with the lights of war. Human ships formed a defensive line between the planet and the approaching swarm battle groups. On the Darwin's bridge, Admiral Kevin Blake coordinated the fleet's movements with calm precision. Jake Morrison stood near the communication station, his hand resting on Echo's armored shoulder. The alien warrior had been allowed onto the bridge for the first time. Those 6 Marines surrounded them with weapons ready. Swarm forces are moving into attack formation, the tactical officer reported. 3 queens identified. Estimated warrior count at 12,000. They outnumber us 4-1. Hold position, Admiral Blake ordered. Let them come to us. Morrison, are you ready with that signal? Jake looked at Echo. The alien's mandibles clicked nervously. Through hours of working together, Jake had learned to read the creature's body language. Echo was afraid but determined. This moment would determine the fate of all thinkers in the swarm. If the signal failed, those 50 brave individuals hidden in the enemy fleet would be discovered and killed. If it succeeded, everything could change. We are ready, sir, Jake said, but we need to wait until they engage. The signal will work best when the swarm is focused on battle and the hive mind is under stress. The wait was agonizing. The Kresh ships crept forward like predators stalking prey. Human gunners tracked targets, fingers hovering over firing controls. On New Terra below, 200,000 civilians huddled in shelters, praying that the fleet above could protect them. Then the swarm attacked. Thousands of warriors launched from their ships in a black wave. They came on individual thrust packs moving too fast for point defense systems to track them all. The first wave hit the human lines like a hammer. The battle erupted into chaos. Ships fired everything they had. Explosions lit up the void. Human fighters engaged Kresh warriors in desperate dogfights. The Darwin shook as a wave of enemies slammed into its shields. "Now," Admiral Blake commanded, "deploy the signal." Echo moved to the communication station with Jake right beside him. The aliens' forearms worked the controls with practiced ease, entering the complex sequence they had programmed. The modified array hummed with power as it began broadcasting. The signal was not something humans could hear. It operated on frequencies that existed between sound and light, between thought and sensation. It carried encoded patterns that spoke directly to the neural structures unique to thinkers. Patterns that said, "You are not alone. You are not errors, wake up. Be free." For a long moment, nothing seemed to happen. The battle continued to rage. Human ships were taking damage. The swarm was pushing through the defensive line. Jake felt his heart sink. Had they failed? Then across the battlefield, something extraordinary occurred. Individual Kresh warriors began to slow down. Some stopped attacking entirely, hanging motionless in space as if confused. Others turned on their fellow warriors, engaging in sudden fights that made no tactical sense. The coordinated swarm assault began to fragment into chaos. "What is happening?" the tactical officer asked in confusion. "The Kresh are fighting each other." "It is working," Jake said, barely believing it himself. "The thinkers are awakening. They are breaking free from the hive mind." On the view screen, they could see the effect spreading like ripples in water. More and more Kresh warriors stopped following orders. Some fled the battlefield entirely. Others formed small groups that seemed to be protecting each other from the warriors that remained loyal to the queens. But not everything went according to plan. Some warriors, freed suddenly from the hive mind's control without preparation, went berserk. They attacked everything around them, friend and foe alike, lost in confusion and rage. The three-way battle became even more chaotic. One of the swarm battle groups broke formation entirely as internal fighting tore through its ranks. Another group retreated at full speed, abandoning the attack. But the third group, under direct control of the most powerful queen, pressed forward with renewed fury. "They are targeting New Terra directly," the tactical officer warned. "They are going to ignore us and hit the planet. All ships intercept course," Admiral Blake ordered. "We cannot let them through." The Darwin moved to block the remaining swarm forces, but they were too far out of position. The Kresh ships would reach the planet before the human fleet could stop them. 200,000 people were about to die, and there was nothing Jake could do to stop it. Echo made a sound of distress. Through their many hours connected via the neural interface, Jake had developed an instinct for what the alien was feeling. Echo was watching its own kind about to commit genocide, and it was suffering. "Echo," Jake said urgently, "can you contact the awakened thinkers? Can they help?" Echo clicked rapidly, its claws moving over the communication controls. It sent out new signals, more focused this time, targeting specific individuals it had identified through Whisper 3's information. Jake watched the view screen, praying for a miracle. The miracle came from an unexpected direction. A swarm destroyer, one of the ships heading toward New Terra, suddenly turned its weapons on the Queen's flagship. The massive vessel, controlled by awakened thinkers who had seized command, fired everything it had at point-blank range. The Queen's flagship shuddered under the assault, its shields collapsing. Other awakened Kresh followed the destroyer's lead. Ships turned on each other. Warriors who had broken free attacked those still under the hive mind's control. The coordinated assault on New Terra dissolved into complete chaos. But there was a price. The Queen's remaining forces, realizing they had been betrayed from within, began systematically destroying any ship or warrior that showed signs of independent thought. Awakened thinkers died by the dozens, cut down by their former comrades before they could fully understand their newfound freedom. "We need to protect them," Jake said urgently. "The awakened Kresh are being slaughtered. They are fighting for us, and we are just watching them die." Admiral Blake made a decision that would be debated for years afterward. All ships, new orders. Engage only Kresh forces that are actively hostile. Any enemy units that are fighting the swarm or retreating are to be considered non-combatants. Protect them if possible. The human fleet moved to cover the awakened thinkers, creating a buffer between them and the still loyal swarm forces. It was a risky move that exposed human ships to more damage, but it saved hundreds of thinker lives. The Darwin itself came under heavy attack. A swarm frigate controlled by a Queen's elite guard broke through the defensive line and headed straight for them. The ship shook violently as weapons fire tore into its hull. Alarms blared. The lights flickered. Shields failing, someone shouted. Hull breach on deck 7. Jake was thrown against the communication station as an explosion rocked the bridge. He looked up to see a section of the outer wall tear open, exposing the interior to vacuum. The emergency shields activated, but not before 3 crew members were pulled into space. Echo moved with startling speed. The alien grabbed Jake with 2 arms and Colonel Harris with another, holding them both against the bulkhead as the atmosphere rushed out. Echo's 4th arm reached out and caught Amy Hart, who had been sliding toward the breach. The alien's strength was the only thing keeping them alive. When the emergency shield sealed the breach, Echo carefully set them down. Jake stared at the creature in shock. Echo had saved his life again and the lives of 2 other humans without hesitation. "Thank you," Jake said simply. Echo clicked in response. The translation device had been damaged in the explosion, but Jake did not need it to understand. The alien's body language, the way it stood protectively near the humans, said everything. The battle for New Terra lasted another 2 hours. By the end, 1 queen was dead, her flagship destroyed by awakened thinkers. The other 2 queens retreated with what remained of their forces, abandoning thousands of warriors who had broken free from the hive mind's control. The human fleet was battered but intact. New Terra was safe, and floating in space around the planet were nearly 800 awakened Kresh, confused and frightened but alive and free. In the aftermath, Jake found himself in a strange position. The awakened Kresh did not trust other humans, but they trusted Echo, and through Echo, they trusted Jake. He became an unofficial ambassador, helping to coordinate between the 2 species that had been enemies hours before. The awakened Kresh called themselves by a new name, chosen collectively in their first act of independent decision-making. They were the awakened, no longer bound to the swarm but not yet certain what they wanted to become. Echo stood with Jake on the observation deck of the Darwin 3 days after the battle. Below them, New Terra gleamed peacefully. Around them floated a mixed fleet of human and awakened ships, an impossible sight that would have been unthinkable a month ago. "What will happen to them?" Jake asked, gesturing toward the awakened ships. "Where will they go?" Echo clicked thoughtfully. A new translation device rendered its words. "Unknown. Awakened have no home. Cannot return to swarm. Many humans still hate us. But have hope. Have choice. First time ever thinkers have choice." "And what about you?" Jake asked. "What will you choose?" Echo turned its triangular head to look at Jake directly. Human Jake Morrison saved Echo life, made possible for many thinkers to be free.